for us to begin tonight. Good to see everybody. A couple of announcements. Any updates on any sick or anybody we need to add to the list? Okay. There's several sign-up sheets on Deanne's door, so be sure to look at that. What we do need is a Wednesday night devotional speaker for July 15th. And so, men, if any of you are able to do that, please put your name down for July 15th. Also, the wedding shower for Lance and Tracy will be July 26th, and there's a sign-up sheet for that. It is for the entire congregation, so men, please attend as well, and it'll be a good time celebrating that. It's hard to believe that September is only 3 months away, but the golf tournament sign-up sheet is now on the door. So he's not here, so I'll say it anyway. Richard said the first 15 people he'll pay for. So,
2 chances next.
So you might ask him about that the next time you see him, if you sign up in the first 15 slots. Okay, that's all I have for tonight.
The invitation song will be number 940, and the song before the Devo will be number 71. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. I want you more than gold or silver, only you can satisfy. You alone are the real joy giver and the apple of my eye. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you.
Quick Devo tonight. Turn with me to the book of Galatians. We can call this 6 reminders from the book of Galatians. Galatians chapter 1, verse 10. For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? If I still please men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. This reminds us to live for God, please God, and don't worry about others' approvals. We live our life on that one. Chapter 2, verse 20. If I have been crucified with Christ, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life that I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Remind you that your past doesn't define you. Chapter 3, verse 27. For as many of you were baptized into Christ, you put on Christ. Reminds us that we're new creatures in Christ. Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law. Reminds us that God always keeps his promises. Galatians chapter 5, verse 25. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Don't let us be led by our feelings. Walk by the Holy Spirit. Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Live righteously. Be careful how you live. There's so many things in the Bible that teaches us how to live and how to love God and how to love one another. Tells us that He will forgive us and tells us how to become a Christian. If you have either one of those needs, will you come forward tonight as we stand and sing?
Hear the sweet voice of Jesus say, "Come unto me, I am the way." Hearken the loving call, obey. Come, for He loves you so. Only a step, only a step. Come, for He bled for you and I. He's the same loving Savior yet, Jesus the crucified. Open for you the pearly gate, loved ones for you. Now watch and wait. Terrible thought to cry too late. Jesus, I come to thee. Only a step, only a step. Come, for He bled for you and I. He's the same loving Savior yet, Jesus the crucified. Please be seated. Teachers are dismissed at this time to prepare their classes, and our last song will be number 578. We will glorify the King of Kings. We will glorify the Lamb. We will glorify the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am. Lord Jehovah reigns in majesty. We will bow before His throne. We will worship Him in righteousness. We will worship Him alone. He is Lord of heaven, Lord of earth. He is Lord of all who live. He is Lord above the universe. All praise to Him we give. Hallelujah to the King of Kings. Hallelujah to the Lamb. Hallelujah to the Lord of Lords, who is the great I am.
Holy Father in heaven, we thank you for another day, another opportunity to serve you. Thank you for allowing us to be here, allowing us to come and study your word, that would guide us and lead us in paths of righteousness. We pray, Father, that you continue to be with us as we go through this hour of study. We pray you be with our number that are unable to be here because of illness. We ask you to continue to strengthen them and bless them as you can. Thank you for your son. Thank you for that sacrifice that he made for us. It's in his name we pray. Amen. So just to get this information, I don't want to put out bad information. Richard, the first 15 people that sign up for the golf tournament, you're paying for, right? That may not have been accurate what I said earlier. My luck, I'd be number 16. But I don't golf, so it's okay. The first time that we met David was how many weeks ago now, as he was being anointed king of Israel. Saul had been disobedient to God, and God took the kingdom from him and sent Samuel down to Bethlehem to the house of Jesse, and David was anointed king. Maybe about a dozen years later now, here we are, as we have been studying through his life and all the twists and turns of this unique kingship has brought us to this point. He has not been king yet, officially, I guess, recognized by the people. Recognized by God, yes, but not recognized by the people because Saul still lived. And last week we talked about the death of Saul. We talked about David's reaction to that with 2 Samuel chapter 1. And so tonight we're going to look at a crown at last. 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 through 7, chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, and by way of a New Testament reference from Peter in the book of Acts, Psalm 2, we know David wrote. There's no heading under Psalm 2 that says David wrote that, but I trust Peter, as New Testament apostle, inspired by God, to say from the prophet David, he said this, and quotes out of Psalm 2. So this is what we're looking at this evening. And there's two different passages, as you've read these, perhaps. At least you should have. 2 Samuel 2, 1 through 7, he becomes king of a tribe. And chapter 5, 1 through 5, he becomes king of the nation. There's that makes three separate occasions where David is recognized as king. The first of which was when God recognized him. The second is when Judah recognizes him, and the third is when the nation recognizes him. And so it's not a simple January 20th, one guy leaves, another guy steps in. This is a process that David's been a part of, and really that's how we're going to look at this. Because sometimes in life, maybe you've seen these pictures. You know, here you are at point A, and you're trying to get to point B, and you've got this picture of this straight linear line that goes from A to B, and that's how you're going to get there. But in fact, maybe from your perspective, that's what it looks like. But there's all these twists and turns and different ways in which you'll go before you finally get to point B. And that's what that happens to us in our lives. It happened to David in his life. And so now we're going to see how he finally received this crown as king over all Israel. In chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, David sought God's direction. He sought the Lord's direction. After the events of the death of Saul and Jonathan and the rest of the boys, we have David going up from Ziklag, and he's asking the Lord in chapter 2, verse 1, "Shall I go to any of the cities of Judah?" The Lord said to him, "Go up, David, go up." David said, "Where shall I go?" He said, "Go to Hebron." All right, now this may seem interesting to us for a couple of reasons. One, does David have the right to call upon God and ask him questions?
Yes.
Trick question. David is the king. Who spoke to God on behalf of the people? The priests. And so it's probably Abiathar that he calls, and he brings the Urim and the Thummim, and he inquires of the Lord through this, okay? So I know the way the text reads, it's like David just, "God, where do I go?" And God answers. There's a process in which they went through. Now, if you go back a few chapters, chapter 22 and verse 10, we know that this is David has gone to, he's fleeing from Saul, and he is going to, I can't find his name, Abiathar the priest. And this is where he gets the showbread and all this. But in chapter 22, verse 10, he inquired of the Lord for him. He went to, Ahimelech, sorry. He went to Ahimelech, and he inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. And so Ahimelech intercedes or inquires of the Lord on behalf of David. If you go to chapter 23, verse 2, David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and attack these Philistines? And the Lord said to David, go and attack the Philistines and save Keilah. And verse 4, David inquired of the Lord once again, and the Lord answered him. And so on two separate occasions he does this. In chapter 30, verse 7 and 8, David said to Abiathar, there he is, the priest, Ahimelech's son, please bring the ephod here to me. And Abiathar brought him the ephod to David, and David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them, without fail recover all. So we know this is something normal for David to do, but he would go through the priest to do this, because the priests were the spokesman to God on behalf of the people, and that applied even to the king. And so David inquires of God, what should I do? Should I go to any of the cities of Judah? Why Judah? Why that tribe? And it's in the southern part of the kingdom, understand? Speculation perhaps, but what do you think? That's the tribe he's from. He goes back home. And so you've got the people that he's accustomed to. Do I go into any of the cities of Judah? God says yes. It's important that David doesn't just assume what God's will is. He waited for an answer from God. He obeyed the instructions. He says, where shall I go? He said, go up to Hebron. I like, maybe it's kind of interesting to me, the way this conversation goes. Shall I go up to any of the cities of Judah? The Lord says, go up. And David has to ask, okay, well, which one? Maybe we need to be a little bit more specific in our prayers sometimes. Not that God doesn't know what we're asking or perhaps where we're headed, but I find that interesting, that God just doesn't say, go up and go to Hebron. David has to inquire a second time, where should he go? So the being specific and making requests to God in prayers as well. Ed?
But we don't have to go through a priest today, do we?
We are priests, and that's the nice part of it. We are a holy priesthood. We are God's priests under this new covenant, that we have access to God without a mediator, an earthly mediator, I should say. So we have the opportunity to go to him directly in prayer with that. God told him to go to Hebron. Why didn't he tell him to go to Jerusalem? He won't go to Jerusalem for another 7.5 years.
They don't like him.
It's not run by the Israelites. The Jebusites live there. It's a city that God is going to choose, but it is not his capital yet. It's not until you get after you get to past chapter 5 that David goes up and takes the city. So Jerusalem will play an important role in David's life. The city of David will be established there. But at this point, it's still run by the Jebusites. It's been going back and forth in control of the Israelites and the Jebusites for years. And right now, the Jebusites have it. So God sends him to Hebron. This is going to be an important role for David. His reign is going to begin someplace other than Jerusalem, which helps prepare him for this ultimate time. How quickly does David act? Between verse 1 and verse 2. Lord, where shall I go? Go to Hebron. Well, I don't know. Let me think about this, right? It's Hebron. You sure Hebron? What does David do? He goes immediately. And not only does he go immediately, but who does he take with him? He takes his 2 wives. He's eventually going to have 6 kids by some other wives also while he's in Hebron. And so he takes his wives. He takes the men who were with him, every man with his household, so they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. Could be close to 2,000 people. It's possible. He had 600 mighty men of valor that were with him. You remember when he went to the Philistines and ended up in Ziklag. And so if you figure every man has a wife, you double that number. Every family has a couple of kids, 2.3 kids, whatever it is. They double that number again. We could be looking at a couple thousand people who are going with David to the city and the area around Hebron. I'm going to look up a couple of verses real quick in the Psalm. Psalm 32 and verse 8. Just some supporting verses to help us with this a little bit. Psalm 32, verse 8. Somebody read that for me. I will instruct you and teach you in the way that you should go, and I will guide you with my eye. How important is it for us before we take any major step in life to seek God's wisdom? Pretty important. Now, you got passages like James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally and upbraideth not. So, we know wisdom comes from God. And before we make any major decisions in life, it's good to go to God in prayer. Now, let's be practical about this for a minute. How does God answer that? How does he direct your path? How does he guide you? David has very direct access. He inquires of God through the priest. God answers. The priest gives the answer. He has a very direct answer to this. So now, how does that work for us? Wouldn't that be nice? I mean, even if we could work it this way, to Justin, ask God what you think, what I should do here, and I ask God, and he answers me, and I tell you. That would be something, wouldn't it? It would wear me out. But because where do I eat today, Justin? I don't know. Eat where you want. The Lord doesn't care. There's a lot of things that it would be nice if we could ask a question and receive a direct answer. That's not how it works today. So how can we apply Psalm 32:8 and into our lives as well? Pray is the first thing. You got to ask. I mean, you've got to speak it, right?
You've got to have faith that it's going to work. Since you prayed for it.
Trust that God is going to deliver. Is he going to deliver just because I asked?
No.
It's got to be according to his will, right? And there are things that we may not necessarily be sinful that we're asking for, but may not just necessarily be part of God's plan. And so, how many times, I know in my life, I don't know about yours, how many times have you prayed for something, thought you knew what the answer was, you thought you knew what the outcome would be, and something else presents itself? A different way, different path, different job, different opportunity, whatever may happen. Providence plays a role in this. The great providence of God that we can't explain, how God through the natural world works things to His glory. I have no real answer to it, but also I can be very specific about what we should do. We need to pray. We need to trust. We need to have faith. We need to wait on God, and it may not be the things that we're looking for. If we come to Him with already have an answer to my question for Him in my mind, and if that's not how it works out, I become angry. It's not going to work that way. Any other thoughts?
You have to say, if it be your will.
Even Jesus said that.
It is up to God to decide. You know, a lot of people, they pray for something and they'll get exactly what they want, and then they think, well, prayer doesn't help. I'm not going to worry. That's not the way it works. You don't get your way all the time.
If I pray for rain and Ron, you pray for no rain, who does God love more? So we can't. That's why I am thankful I'm not in that position, to hear prayers from two different sides of the situation. Well, which one do you do? And that's why God is God, and it's going to be His will, wherever his plan leads. And you bring up, not my will, but yours be done. Jesus is surrendering. If there's some other way, well, if there's some other way to redeem mankind that doesn't involve the pain of the cross, maybe we could try that. But what did Jesus know? There was no other way. But yet that's still his prayer. And his prayer ended with, but I'm going to do what your will says. And too many times I think we know what the Lord's will is because it's here. It's in the New Testament. We follow it as Christians. We know what the Lord's will is, and we think, well, even though I know what it is, I'm still going to try to go a different way. We put ourselves in line with God, let God deal with it, let God take care of it, and follow his providence. David receives a partial kingdom, verses 2 through 7. So he goes with his wives, his men. They go to the cities of Hebron. Then came the men of Judah in verse 4, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. Isn't that exciting? You're the king of a tribe. Is that what David expected 12 years ago? Let's ask that. Do you suppose? God has anointed me king over Israel, all 12 tribes. And now here I am 12 years later, and one tribe shows up to anoint me as king. All right, so how do you deal with disappointment sometimes? How do you deal with discouragement? Well, let's find out what David did. They anointed him king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying, the men of Jabesh Gilead were the ones who buried Saul. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing to bring up. If you go back to the last book, chapter 31, we remember the Philistines had abused the corpses of Saul and his sons, and the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead that Saul helped in 1 Samuel 11 went very valiantly, took them off the wall, burned their bones, buried them under a tamarisk tree. Later moved them, right? We talked about that last week. Later moved them, and thought David had them moved and buried somewhere else. And so they bring that up. They say, the men of Jabesh Gilead. Why did the men of Jabesh Gilead do it? Well, they appreciated what Saul had done, but it is also some of Saul's kin. It's in that area. Some of his family. So David shows kindness to them. You are blessed of the Lord. You have shown this kindness to your Lord, to Saul, and have buried him. And now may the Lord show kindness and truth to you. I also repay you this kindness because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strengthened and be valiant, for your master Saul is dead. And also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. If there's going to be an insurrection, it may start with the people of Jabesh Gilead, because obviously they love Saul. Now, I say convenient and inconvenient. My Bible ends on verse 7 on this page. Turn it over, and there's a man who is made king over Israel by Abner on the next page. I don't like to turn to that page because David is trying to form a relationship with individuals who may eventually come back to try to take the king from him. David waited patiently on God's timing, and when the time came for him to finally be king, with Saul gone, he only becomes king of a tribe, and he still has problems with some people who are still loyal to Saul. A couple of things to think about. David's trying to cultivate support for the work that he wants to do, and that involves unity. Sometimes we become very caught up in our own agendas, and we tend to forget about what maybe other people are thinking or what other people may be feeling about a certain situation. It's oftentimes good to be reminded of this point that David is looking for cooperation. I suppose he could have forced them into servitude and made them accept him, but yet he does it in a very different way. He shows kindness. He commends them for honoring Saul, and he tells them, I'm going to be showing kindness to you. I appreciate you. I thank you for what you've done. By the way, I'm king. And so you've got this loyalty and righteousness that David's encouraging from them by being kind to them. It doesn't hurt to be kind to people once in a while. Psalm 27. Psalm 27, verse 14. Who can read that? Who wants to read that? I know you can all read. Who wants to read that?
Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord.
Wait for the Lord. Boy, that's difficult sometimes. We become discouraged when it seems like God's promises are delayed. I can't imagine David and all the years that he was waiting, but David teaches us we're not on our timetable. We're on God's timetable. In due season we shall reap if we faint not. Galatians 6:9. And so David doesn't get the full kingdom yet. He only gets the tribe of Judah. And so could he become discouraged? Could he said, I don't want this? Could he have just said, well, never mind, if I don't get it all, I don't want any of it? Yes, but David's been patient, and he's still going to be patient for a little while longer. All right, anything else? Anything to add there?
Yeah, question.
Sure, Ed.
Let's say before the kings entered into this, was Jerusalem and Judah on good terms with each other?
Jerusalem is, as I said, is occupied by the Jebusites, and so they probably, I say probably, it was one of those things where you have Canaanites living among you, and it's been that way since Joshua's day. They didn't drive them all out, and so it's pretty much this sense of they live there. We've tried to take it a couple of times. They took it back, and now they have the power to stay there, and it was just recognized as that. I don't think the tribe of Judah, obviously Jerusalem does not play a very important role yet. Not yet. We know it does. I mean, anytime we read about the city of Salem, Melchizedek, in the book of Genesis, or the priest of Salem that was Jerusalem at the time, or any of those other references to the mountains where this city is, our ears perk up because we know the significance of Jerusalem. But at this point, until David takes the city and brings the ark. By the way, that is in chapter 5. And brings the ark back. There's no real appreciation for the city yet.
I thought they killed, I had forgotten that they had not killed all Saul's sons.
No.
Hit him, but
You made me turn the page. Ishbosheth, Abner, and there's a civil war that takes place between Israel and Judah with Ishbosheth and David. And you read through that chapter 3, where it even describes there's war between the house of Saul and the house of David. And Abner tries to join forces with David, and Joab kills Abner, and David gets upset because Abner shouldn't have died. And it's just this, I don't want to say it's a transition period, but it's a period of there's a power vacuum. If David's only the king of one out of 12 tribes, who's going to be king of the other 11? And so let's get one of Saul's sons to do it, and that's not who it's supposed to be. Well, David unites the nation. Then in 2 Samuel 5, 1 through 3, the tribes recognize their relationship with him. This is, again, the civil war that takes place, and Mephibosheth is murdered, and Abner's dead, and so really there's nothing to stand in the way of David being king completely. The text, there's only 5 verses here, and it's a very short, condensed version of what happens. I want you to turn over to 1 Chronicles 12, because the Chronicles, they chronicle quite a bit. And so 1 Chronicles 12 is very telling. Beginning in verse 23, these were the numbers of the divisions that were equipped for war, came to David at Hebron to turn over the kingdom of Saul to him according to the word of the Lord. 24 down through 37, you have each of the tribes sending their men. And so it's each tribe showing up and pledging their allegiance to David. Verse 38, all these men of war who could keep ranks came to Hebron with a loyal heart to make David king over all Israel. And all the rest of Israel were of one mind to make David king. And they were there with David 3 days, eating and drinking, and their brethren had prepared for them. Moreover, those who were near to them, as far away from Issachar as Issachar and Zebulun and Naphtali. Oh, that's northern part of the kingdom. I mean, we're getting up into Chicago, right? That's up there where nobody goes. Zebulun, Naphtali, Issachar were bringing food on donkeys and camels and mules and oxen, provisions of flour and cakes and figs and cakes of raisins, wine and oil and oxen and sheep abundantly, for there was joy in Israel. So, 2 Samuel doesn't really give us a whole picture of this. It just says the tribes came to David and said, "You're bone of our bone, flesh of our flesh, and indeed we're going to make you king over us." But there's a couple things I do want to point out in this text of 2 Samuel. One of the things that they say in verse 2, it says, "Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel out and brought us in." What was the song that they sang? Saul's killed his thousands, David's killed his 10,000s. When he went to fight the Philistines, who went? It was David. When he went to, we studied this so many times. It's being sent out and acting honorably and defeating the enemies of Israel. They remembered that. And then, the second part of this, the Lord said, and the Lord said to you, "You shall shepherd my people Israel and be ruler over Israel." I don't like reading a lot into things, but I'm going to read a lot into this for a moment. The Lord said to you, "You shall shepherd my people Israel, and you shall be ruler over Israel." Why in that order? Shepherd, then ruler. What's a shepherd do? Feeds, tends, protects, leads, guides. This is what the king was supposed to be. This is what the leader was supposed to be. The one that guided and led and protected and fed the sheep. He'll be ruler, but Israel hadn't had a shepherd. They'd had a ruler. They haven't had a shepherd yet. Godly leadership. This is what it's built on. It's built on service and faithfulness and character. Because what do they say in verse 2? We remember how you behaved when you led us at the battle. And we also remember that you are the shepherd. And that's that picture of how are they able to have so much joy that we read about in 1 Chronicles? Why are they bringing all this and giving it all to David and pledging their allegiance to David? Why are they all turning over to him their lives? Because of his character and his faithfulness and his service. And if we're ever going to lead anybody, those are the characteristics that will lead people rather than just power and position. David could have swept through there with his 600 mighty men and subdued the entire nation. But they came to him with his, describing his behavior. Proverbs 16:7. First one to that, if you want to read that. Proverbs 16:7.
When a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him.
Boy, that sounds like David. If your ways are pleasing to the Lord, even your enemies are going to be at peace with you. That's what David did. First and foremost, do what the Lord said. Secondly, the enemies will come around. And so David unifies the nation, and he finally receives a full kingdom. Verse 4 and verse 5. David was 30 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. The promise is now fulfilled. David's 30. Anything significant about the number 30? Jesus was 30 when he started his ministry. There's something to be said about a little bit of maturity. I know Josiah was 8. Don't bring that up. But there's something to be said about a man who is 30 finally being made king. You think he could have handled all this at 18? Oh no, oh no. If you were to ask me, why did God choose age 20 and under to enter into the promised land? Anybody over 20 couldn't make it. Sometimes we tend to put a lot of pressure on younger people to make the decision to follow God when they're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. God seemed to have a higher number than that to deal with certain things. With Israel, it was 20. With the king, it was David's 30. With Jesus, I mean, there's usually people began ministry at the age of 30, so that wasn't surprising about Jesus. But David's 30 when he begins to reign. Gives him plenty of time to reign. He reigns for 40 years. Could you imagine having a president for 40 years? Or someone ruling over us for, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how long did Saul reign? 40 years. How long did David reign? 40 years. How long did Solomon reign? 40 years. It doesn't go as well for the rest of them after that. But to think you had 3 kings and 120 years. Anyway, all right. So years have passed since Samuel's anointed him. The kingdom's now united. 12 tribes under one king. There's no division. There's just unity. What God has promised, God has delivered. And sometimes we need to have patience and knowing God will work out his plan for us. Philippians 1. Verse 6. What does that say? Anybody?
Being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ.
Does God ever give up on us? No. We give up on him a lot because we feel like he's given up on us. He never gives up on us. And so being confident of the very thing, the work that he began with us, he will accomplish. And so whatever it is that's going on in our lives, it's not the end. God is still working. Where the kids are, they're having their vacation Bible school this week, and it ends today, but we were able to watch the last couple of days, the adult class, and it's building a spiritual house. And understand, this is a big congregation, and they've got massive decorations. I don't know how they got stuff from the city to use as construction decorations from it's a small town, but it's enormous. But one of the things that they were really hitting on in the adult class was the idea that even though it may feel like the construction never ends, God is still working. It feels like construction never ends, right? Every time you drive across the interstate, it's never going to end. They're still working. And sometimes it feels like in our lives the house is never fully built, but yet God is still working on it. He's still building it. And so the promises God made, the patience, the hardship, the waiting for David, he fulfilled. All right, any thoughts on those points?
Wasn't Joseph about 30 when he became second in command for Pharaoh?
I'm going to say yes because it fits the narrative. I think you're right, Jay. I think you are. I think you're right. I'm trying to think. He would have been 18 when he went off into when he was sold.
So men don't get sense till they're about 30.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. For women, it's about 15. Men, it's 30. We really don't know what's going on. There's more truth to that than you think. I look back. We moved. Well, goodness, we probably moved to Fairfield when I was 30, and I wouldn't have been ready for any of that there at 18. So yeah, there's some sense to be good advice there. All right, Psalm 2. We know that this was written by David, and we're tying this into our text tonight. Verses 1 through 3, the nations rebel against God. Why do the nations rage, and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bones in pieces and cast away their cords from them. Okay, first of all, as we go through this, I failed to mention this, but first of all, you're going to see messianic prophecy here. Psalm 2 is highly filled with prophetic words concerning Jesus. But does David know that? If you just turn your mind off with Jesus for a moment, and it's hard to do, with this psalm, and just look at it from David as king, his point of view. The nation's raging. They're raging against the Lord's anointed, saying we can go and we can beat them, we can defeat them, we can take them. They're raging against God. David maybe he's not the man that they all think he is. God declares his king, verses 4 through 6. He who sits in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall hold them in derision. Then he shall speak to them in his wrath and distress them in his deep displeasure. Yet I have set my king on my holy hill of Zion. Again, we've still got about 7 years from the time David becomes king in Jerusalem, but we know where we're talking about. So what did God do? Well, if you can contrast verse 2, the kings of the earth came together, the rulers were taking counsel among themselves, and while they're trying to figure out how to defeat God, God's setting up a king. And he's putting that king on his throne, and that king is ultimately Jesus, is what we're dealing with, but it all starts with David and his line. And so God is, in contrast to what schemes man is trying to come up with, God says, your plans don't make any difference to him. He declares who his king will be. The Son receives the nations, verses 7 through 9. I will declare the decree. The Lord has said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance, and the ends of the earth for your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Again, it's almost difficult and impossible to not see the Hebrews 1 in this passage, because this is where the writer of Hebrews pulls this out. Today you are my son, today I've begotten you. From that sense of Jesus coming into this world, the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth, we see that, and that's the application for us in the New Testament. But look at it from David's point of view. He is God's king. He is the one that God has chosen. He's the one that God has, quote unquote, begotten as the ruler of Israel. And so the nations will bow before him. He'll certainly bring them in line, so that when Solomon becomes king, good trivia question, how many wars does Solomon fight? None. Not a single one. Because every nation that is around them has been subdued. And that is because of what David did. All right. And then verses 10 through 12, call to submit and take refuge. Now therefore be wise, O kings, be instructed, you judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you perish in the way. When his wrath is kindled but a little, blessed are those who put their trust in him. Have respect for God. Fear the Lord, respect the Lord, follow the Lord. Rejoice with trembling, or have delight in what God's done. David has been made king, and the nations can rage against this, and they can fight against this, or they can accept it and be glad, and like Israel was glad on that occasion. So again, was it Acts 4:25, where we have this application made primarily to Jesus, but we're told, who by the mouth of your servant David have said, why do the nations rage and the people plot vain things? He applies this to Christ by using his name. The kings of the earth took their stand, and the rulers were gathered together against the Lord, against his Christ. And this is the application of what happened to Jesus. And so there's a fulfillment there with him. There's a lot of things in the Old Testament that have to do primarily with Jesus and only with Jesus, but there are also dual fulfillments of some things. This is one of them. David's kingship is a fulfillment, and then ultimately the kingship of Christ. All right, so David's journey to the throne. It wasn't easy, but I think it teaches us a couple of things, and then we'll entertain your questions. First of all, seek God's direction. Big changes in life, questions about things you don't know where to go, what to do. First and foremost, seek God's direction, prayer, wait, patience, trust. Trust in His timing. What is time to God? It means nothing to Him. A day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. And you know, there are times where even in our lives, I think we understand that, because years go by fast and days go by slow. And it just, to us, even time is strange. But to God, time means nothing. And so what God's plan is now may not be fulfilled until your great-great-great-grandkids come along. And so don't ever feel like you failed. God has His timing, and we need to trust in it. Lead through faithful service. David was faithful in all that he did for Saul. The people remembered that. They recognized that. They saw his kindness in Jabesh Gilead. And then just believe in God's faithfulness. He's never given up on us, and we can't give up on Him, can't give up on ourselves. After years of waiting, testing, and trusting, the crown finally came to David. And it's interesting that he doesn't receive that crown at 18. It took him some time to prepare. I think he needed to grow up. I think he needed to understand his place, find out who he is, and before God hands him the keys to the kingdom, he prepares him. And I think that's something you see all throughout the scriptures. Jesus did that with His apostles. We do that with our kids. We prepare to the next generation. All right, any last comments or questions there?
I was reading here a little bit in chapter 3, where he's got all his women. I guess before he got wives at 30, took on all his wives and kids. And it's kind of odd, I always think it's the same with Bathsheba. But Deuteronomy 17:17 says you shouldn't have many wives.
Yeah, you shouldn't have that many wives.
6 too many.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Times of this ignorance God overlooked. And I think there's a reason God calls it ignorance, because it is. Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines. Only one he truly, really loved. But I think, obviously, David, he falls in the path of all the kings. This was, some of them were political, some of them were emotional. Bathsheba was emotional. But he falls in line with what kings would do. And God has prohibitions about it, yes. And as a matter of fact, He even tells the kings, don't take chariots, don't take horses. And what does Solomon do? He builds a chariot stable. I mean, it's incredible. He fights no wars, but he's got enough weapons to win wars. It's what God says and what we do are oftentimes two different things. And so, yeah, that's a good point.
He must have a lot of time on his hands.
Well, we know he did with Bathsheba. He should have been out fighting the battles, and he wasn't. Any other thoughts?
I was going to say, I think it processes, I guess, but, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw one time, kind of like 3-step procedure, but pray, ask, and the Bible says you'll receive. Now, you may not receive what you want, obviously, but if you ask, first you got to ask God, and you got to be pretty clear on what you're asking for. And then I feel like then, you kind of give that burden or whatever over to God, and then, but you're not just sitting there, still waiting for it to fall in your lap. I think that's a cool thing about David. He always inspired me a lot as a young man. He was always, and then the next step I would say is like action, I guess, or like the habit. So, like where your attention is, the energy is going to follow that. So, your attention has to be on God, has to be on prayer, has to be on reading the Bible. You have to be looking for the answers. And then, if you continue that, nothing happens, and then, God may not give you exactly what you want, but the process never like, he's definitely, I wouldn't say like a lazy guy, like he's always striving, he's always, you know, and like, obviously he's not perfect at all, you know, but, you know, God continues to, you know, he continues to chase after God, like he's hungry for God and what he has in store, and he follows the path that God laid out for him. That always inspires me, you know.
Right. I guess he could have just, when he's anointed king, just sat down in his house and said, okay, I'll just, give it to me. But he goes and works, and he works his heart is set toward God. And you're absolutely right. If we're going to achieve and fall into God's will, we've got to put our trust in God and do what God wants us to do.
He had a lot of patience,
Yeah.
and all that stuff he saw.
A lot of opportunities to take it for himself.
And a lot of wisdom to wait and be patient.
Mhm.
He did some foolish things, but
We all need to wait and be patient. And that'll, sometimes, that's hard to do, but God certainly has delivered in my life by being patient. Any other thoughts there? All right, next week, we're bringing the ark to Jerusalem. David, read through chapter 5. David's going to take Jerusalem. He's going to set up his kingdom there. And then the ark's coming back to Jerusalem, but not without its problem. If you know what it is, you know what it is. So we'll be looking at that next time. All right, let's bow for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for blessing us. We thank you for guiding us and leading us in your way. We ask as we contemplate the life of David and the stories of his life, we'll be able to see the wisdom that you gave him and help us apply it to our lives. We thank you for this time together. We thank you for blessing us. Please continue to watch over us and keep us safe until the next point in time.